Voters in 4 states approved ballot measures that will change their state constitutions to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for crime, while those in a 5th state rejected the move. That was Louisiana. So the measures approved Tuesday curtail the use of prison labor in Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont. So in Louisiana, a former slave-holding state, voters rejected a ballot question known as Amendment 7 that asked whether they supported a constitutional amendment to prohibit the use of involuntary servitude in the criminal justice system. And that measure was voted against with a significant margin of like 60%. Interestingly, Louisiana is a state with a very high lockup quota. So they have these contracts, they have 2 for-profit prisons, and in the contracts, they agree to a 96% occupancy rate, regardless of what crime rates look like. So that means taxpayers, if there are empty beds in the prisons, will then be paying the companies that are contracting prison labor, which is insane. There's also been a lot of interesting disinformation out of Louisiana, people saying that a no vote on this would just send it back to the legislators and they get to decide on it. So that's an interesting case. But moving on, ahead of Election Day, State Representative Edmund Jordan, a Democrat from Baton Rouge and author of the amendment, reportedly asked voters to reject the measure. So let's get into this. Why did he request this? Because the wording on the ballot differed from his proposal. According to Jordan, the initial goal of the bill was to restrict slavery and involuntary servitude in total with no exceptions. When Jordan presented the amendment, it was considered an amendment in concept. He says by the time the amendment made it to the ballot, there was confusion with the language. People could interpret the bill to do the opposite of what Jordan proposed. If residents voted yes to the proposed amendment, Jordan says the language in the Louisiana Constitution would remain the same. Jordan said this would not be detrimental, but a no vote would give lawmakers the opportunity to make amendment language clearer and remove ambiguity. So is a no vote a win? Jordan clarified the way Louisiana's proposed amendment change reads now. It could leave cases for interpretation in courts. I will tell you, after the decision in Roe versus Wade, I certainly didn't want to leave anything to chance, said Jordan. So, very interesting case out there in Louisiana. Goes to show how much power the people have who write up our ballots. They could manipulate the language so that the vote goes in one way or another. Circling back to some other initiatives, the 4 approved initiatives won't force immediate changes in the state's prisons, but they may invite legal challenges over the practice of coercing prisoners to work under threat of sanctions or loss of privileges if they refuse the work. So what about the other states? After Tuesday's vote, more than a dozen states still have constitutions that include language permitting slavery and involuntary servitude for prisoners. Several other states have no constitutional language for or against the use of forced prison labor. Voters in Colorado became the first to approve removal of slavery exception language from the state constitution in 2018, followed by Nebraska and Utah 2 years later. So I want to talk about what they mean by exception language. Very similar to what's in the Constitution of the United States. The 13th Amendment, which outlaws slavery, says slavery is illegal except as punishment for a crime. So that is what is meant by the exception language. Interestingly, this was voted for in Alabama, where currently prisoners are on strike. So very interesting coming out of Alabama, voters voting in the right direction there. Louisiana is an interesting case, but it's just insane to me that we're at the point where we have to vote on this in 2022, that we still have slavery in the United States. It is alive and well. It is legally defined as slavery. Prison labor is slavery. I don't think it should be punishment for a crime, but there were voters who showed up to the polls and said, yes, it should be, which is very scary. Dina, what are your thoughts?
I think anything dealing with prisons does take a long time for the public to kind of start to understand because of the nature of how secretive the system is, right? I mean, you're not there, you can't really see what's happening, you don't often hear about what's happening. And so it takes a tremendous effort for people involved in the interests of prisoners to get a message out and heard. And it is true. I mean, the problem with the prison system, if you have a private prison system, which we have a lot of private prisons, and they lobby to elect certain judges who are more pro-crime, are more likely to sentence people longer, then you have more prisoners, and then you have more slave labor. So it's kind of this really disgusting cycle. And I'm glad that a lot of states are voting to remove that. Really, greed can be the root of so many problems, right? And if you have a private company who knows they now have free labor, I mean, that just feeds into the greed of this system. Let's take out the greed. But probably not many people know that this even exists. And so it's great that they're getting this out there and making a change.
Yeah, this is something that I think about all of the time. I think we need a similar national ballot initiative for amending the Constitution legally. I know we have to go through Congress and there are many hiccups to doing something like that, but just insane that the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution still permits slavery as punishment for a crime. And some states in very conservative parts of the country are ahead of us nationally on this, which is very sad.